For more on today's meeting between President Obama and Prime Minister Erdogan, as well as what they plan to do with Syria, I'm joined by Bulent Aliriza, Director of the Turkey Project at the Center for International Studies. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you for inviting me.
Obviously, Turkey and the U.S. agree on a lot of things in regards to Syria, but there are still a lot of differences between these two countries. Do you think Erdogan's visit did enough to convince President Obama to do more?
I'm afraid not. In fact, what they agree on is that Assad should not be the leader of Syria. But what they do not agree is on how to get there. Most of the burden is being borne by Turkey, with 400,000 refugees on its territory. It's already cost over $1 billion. There have been explosions within Turkey, as you know, because of the ongoing violence spilling over the border. And what we have in the U.S. president is somebody who still says, even though my red line has been crossed, I still want more evidence. And I'm afraid he's going to send the Turkish prime minister back to his problem with Syria empty-handed.
So a lot of lip service, it seems like, from the U.S. government. And you mentioned the refugee issue and this recent violence. How impatient is the Turkish government getting at this point with the Syria crisis?
Not only the Turkish government, but also the Turkish people. I was in Gaziantep, which is very close to the border, for 2 days just last week before I came back for the talks. And people were complaining about the number of Syrians who had crossed the border and were resident in the city. Clearly there are tensions with the local population. Clearly the Syrian refugees themselves are not happy because there's very little prospect that they're going to go back to their own countries. Unfortunately, it looks as if the tide of war is turning in Assad's favor with the help of the Russians, the Iranians, and Hezbollah from Lebanon. So Turkey is going to be stuck with this problem for some time. Assad was not going to be replaced in the near future, and the U.S. cavalry is not coming in.
What are the options for Turkey if it's not going to get any additional help from the United States and perhaps some other Western nations? Where do they go next?
Well, theoretically, he could reverse course. I'm talking about Mr. Erdogan, and say, let's make up with Assad and let's stop supporting the opposition. That's something that he cannot even conceive. So he's going to continue to support the opposition, continue to host the refugees, and hope that somehow the U.S. can be persuaded to be more willing to use its diplomatic and military muscle to get the Russians to change their position at the UN, and also to provide arms and perhaps a safe zone to turn the tide against Assad. But it doesn't look likely.
Well, I want to get your take on what the UN General Assembly did the other day and that resolution. Do you think that will do anything? And I want to also get your thoughts on this sort of U.S.-Russian peace conference that they've been talking about.
Well, to start with the first question, it will do absolutely nothing. It made the sponsors feel good, but beyond that, I think it makes very little difference. The real action has to be in the Security Council, and that's where Russia and also China are backing any kind of movement, and the U.S. is not pressuring them in any meaningful way to change their minds. Now, the Russian-U.S. talks at the level of the Foreign Secretary and Foreign Minister was actually very interesting. The U.S. has moved quite considerably in the direction of the Russians. The Russians don't want to see Assad go without being sure exactly what's going to replace him. And the idea of convening a conference based on Geneva Communique for its transitional arrangement involving Assad and the opposition is much closer to Russia's thinking than to the U.S. and is absolutely anathema to the Turks, who are supposed to be persuading the opposition to actually attend that meeting.
I guess we'll have to see what happens. Mr. Aliriza, we appreciate your perspective and your time once again on the show.
Thank you.